Hey everyone, welcome to the Do the Thing podcast. This is your host, Stacey Lauren. Today's episode is a little different. Well, it's a lot different from my past interviews. This time, you get to hear me on the hot seat. Adam Webber from CallCast invited me to talk to him so we could dive deep into the Do the Thing formula. CallCast is the podcast platform my podcast is hosted on. And they were selected to be the podcast platform that the Boys and Girls Club uses to start a new podcasting program. Adam is currently creating a program for the Boys and Girls Club. And after seeing my success with the Do the Thing challenges, he wants to incorporate the Do the Thing formula, I'm game, into the program. I cannot wait for you guys to hear me explain why every piece of the Do the Thing formula will help these young students and you achieve anything you want in life. Not only will you learn how every piece of the Do the Thing formula connects, but I will also explain how I personally follow the formula to build my Do the Thing vision. So sit back and listen as Adam interviews me.
All right. Got it. Beautiful. Well, I am so excited to kick off this very first recording session with Stacey. A quick little backstory from how I ended up meeting you. It was probably a couple of years now, and you reached out and you were in the process of writing a book called Do the Thing, and you were kind of unraveling all the pieces and figuring out how it would be put together. And you had a strategy session on your own with one of your mentors, I think, and you talked about maybe we should start, or maybe you should start a podcast, and what could that podcast do to help kind of spark ideas that would help them with the book? And since then, you now have recorded how many podcasts?
130.
130 podcasts, which is amazing, and created a community, and I think had new insights into your book that totally were explosive and taking you in new directions. And so it's kind of this kernel of an idea has blossomed into a full tree with all these branches that you're now doing, but it all relates back to this kind of core concept of the Do the Thing culture, which is why I wanted to have you on and talk to you, because as we are starting and getting ready to launch a platform for podcasting for clubs, groups, kids, and educational kind of experience, one of the things that I wanted to include was from people like yourself who are out there in the world doing really fascinating, amazing things, having podcasts, but also taking your podcast and turning it into so much more. And what I've watched you do with building a community and taking risks and putting yourself out there on this adventure has been an amazing thing to watch, and just kind of being part of from this side to just kind of watch you blossom and grow and do so many neat things, and you're fearless. And so part of the challenge of doing something new, but also really when it comes to podcasting, is a lot of us get stuck and we don't end up ever doing it because of the amount of fear that it takes. And we question ourselves and we're exposing ourselves, and we have to be vulnerable and put ourselves out into the world. And so I thought this would be a great first conversation to touch on kind of what you've come up with in terms of getting people unstuck and out of their own way and actually doing the things that we want to do in order to live the potential of what is out there to live the best lives for ourselves. So with that, do you want to fill in about a little bit about who you are and kind of then go from there?
Yeah, thank you. And you've been such a big part of this, Adam. I mean, it's actually only been a year, which is crazy when I think about it. I think it was last February when I contacted you. And you mentioned the word fearless. And for the people listening, I wanted to point out that it feels fearless now, but it didn't start off that way. I remember reaching out to you in the very beginning saying, I am not a good interviewer. I don't know if I should be doing this podcast. And then from the very beginning, you said it's something new. No one's good at anything when they're starting something new. And it's funny because I've known that. I already was doing the thing with other stuff. So I have that mentality. But because this was a brand new thing to me, it almost crippled me to this point of just feeling uncomfortable doing this. And so I really want to point that out, because if you are scared, you're exactly where you should be, because a podcast is a great place to start, to really get to know yourself and to push yourself past a little bit of a limit because all you're doing is you're talking into a computer. And it's a great place. Or even sometimes I do some episodes from my phone, just if I'm feeling stuck. And I think that's such a beautiful way to challenge yourself and start to get more confident in what you're doing. And then as far as me, I owned a business for 20 years and I exited that business. And it took me a year to really figure out what I wanted. And the funny thing was I was exploring all of these different businesses to see what I wanted to do next. And at the same time, I started my podcast, Do the Thing. And what I realized was as each idea that I had sort of fell to the wind, all of a sudden, recently in the last month, I looked at Do the Thing and I was like, wait, this is really the thing that I need to, that's my thing that I'm going to do. And then all those businesses I was exploring connected now to this podcast, and I can do everything that I've wanted because I have this podcast. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And in terms of what a podcast brings to people, you get to know who you are, what you want from life. You get to have deep conversations with people. What's great too is the skills that you're going to learn from just having a podcast. They're going to help you in whatever you do in life, whether it's interviewing for a job or doing a startup or wanting investors someday. These skills that you're building through this means of the podcast, it's when you look back, you're going to see how everything started from here.
That's brilliant. Tell me, all right, let's start with the mindset, because I feel like there's something in this kind of fear stage that holds us back, that stops us from reaching out to somebody. And I've seen just kind of like how you reached out to me. I see the people who do end up reaching out and who are curious and are willing to put themselves out there end up going twice as far and twice as fast as someone who tries to do everything themselves and gets in their own way and stops themselves many times. And the amount of conversations I've had with people where they said, you know what, I wanted to podcast 5 years ago or 3 years ago, and I bought a mic, but then I just didn't know what to do from there. So I stopped. And then finally they reach out and say, can I have a couple conversations with you to help push me into the space? And they end up doing it. And then I look at the list of the stuff that now, since you've embarked on this journey, you're doing Toastmasters, you've done stand-up, you've done live podcasts where you're podcasting out live to people, you're building communities, you're giving talks. It's snowballed into you just putting yourself out there faster in more extreme ways, doing street interviews where you go up to random people in Paris and talking to them. You know, it's just, you do all these things that normally a lot of us, we would hold ourselves back from doing, but it's like you building that courage muscle once, and then a second time makes it so I see you doing more and more and more stuff faster and faster and faster. So yeah, is there anything in there that you want to extrapolate on?
Yeah, you know what might be really good is if I work you through the Do the Thing formula, I'm game, and then how it relates to what I've been doing and then what you guys could actually use as you're starting on this journey. Would that be okay?
I would love to. Yeah, let's start with I'm game. So tell us, what is I'm game?
Yeah.
And how you came up with it.
So the great thing is it started from the podcast because I'm writing the book and I called Do the Thing and I'm really excited about it, but I'm blocked. I couldn't remember a lot of my stuff. And so the person that you mentioned earlier that I talked to, that was a book strategist and also a mentor, she had mentioned I should get interviews of other people that also did the thing. And that's when I decided to start the podcast because I'm like, well, if I'm going to be spending my time interviewing people, I'd much rather record it and then maybe have an ability to put it on a podcast if I wanted to. And so then I started interviewing people, and that's where the formula came from. It was the first 80 interviews. Every interview, I'm dissecting the formula of how they do the thing. And so I saw these common patterns over and over again. And then I wrote the patterns down on index cards. Actually, I'll show you my strategy. My best kept strategy for everything is writing on index cards. And they were strewn over my table. And then all of a sudden I saw the words appear and it was so cool. And it's I'm game. And the I is identify the why. So when you're starting a podcast, and honestly, if you're doing anything in life, but we can start with just the podcast because that's what we're talking about here, really tap into why you want to do it. What are you hoping to get from it? So if let's say you had all the time in the world, all the money in the world, everything that you've ever dreamed of, and you're starting this podcast, what would you want that to be like? What do you think that will do for you? What do you think it would do for other people? And so tap into that. And then you could pretend like you're a 4-year-old and keep asking yourself why, until I don't want you guys to cry, but anyway, that's normally the thing, is that you get it to the point that you're crying because you care so much about what the reason is you want to do the thing. And then that leads into mindset. So the M in I'm Game is mindset. You touched on that earlier. Mindset, you're right. There's so much in mindset. With mindset, when things get hard, you go back to the why, because when something's hard and you forget why you wanted to do it, why would you want to continue? But if you remember what that purpose was and what drove you to start, that could help you. The other thing I've been doing lately, and you mentioned I've been doing these challenges in my community. So every challenge I'm working on identifying even more what gets to move people. And that's what the beautiful thing is, you guys, is this came from my podcast. So it started with my podcast. I decided when the formula came, I would test it on these personal growth challenges. And then it started with 100 people, the first challenge. The second one, I had 500. Third one, I had 1,000. And now I have 1,500 on the fourth one. And I am really tapping into what helps people move. So this dare that I do now, I give them dares. And the nice thing about a dare, and we've talked about this, Adam, is through the lens of something, you're able to have more courage. And so that's what I love about the idea of a dare. It's like a game. It's fun and it makes you have more courage to do something. So through the lens of these dares, I basically am telling them to do things. So an example for mindset is I'll say, tell me what all of your excuses are on why you can't do it. Because I want to get it out right in the very beginning. Why can't you do this thing? And so that's what they do, is they say why they can't do it. And then they tell me, but why they can anyway on each of those excuses. So they're already figuring out ahead of time what's going to stop them. So then they're coming up with the answers. And then if there's something that's a deal breaker, like, oh, if this happens, then I definitely can't do it. Negotiate that ahead of time. So then you know what's going to stop you. And so that way you're not making a decision at the time. So that's been a huge thing, are the excuses. And then also any stories. Notice any stories you hear yourself saying, like, I'm not good enough, or people aren't going to like me, or they're going to laugh at me, or whatever, insert whatever it is that's coming up for you. That's also going to be a big piece of mindset. Mindset has a lot of other things like keeping it fun and controlling your attitude, but those are kind of the core ideas of it. And then I can keep going if you want. I can go through the whole thing.
Give us the whole breakdown and take it through, because this formula that you've put together, I'm Game, is an acronym, I think, in case anyone hadn't picked up on that yet. And each piece of the I'm Game breaks down to an essential piece to help people, be able to do the thing, to be able to move into whatever it is that's holding them back. They're able to kind of put themselves out, or what's the ultimate place where we're going?
Yeah, it helps you tap into what makes you feel alive and to give you a sense of purpose and contribution and fulfillment, because you're not being held back by limiting thoughts or doubt or anything that comes up when you're trying to do something new, because doing new things is scary. But the more that you do them, the more that you take micro steps to be able to move, it breaks through all those barriers. So then you're able to do not just this podcast, but it's going to lead into every area of your life, which is so cool when it happens. So so we can go right into G in Game, which is goals. And goals are great because with the podcast, you could set really simple goals. So if you're let's say you're going through this process and you're getting stuck on something, make the goal smaller. A lot of people don't realize you don't need to have these huge goals. So one of the things I had done, because I wanted to do the thing, start a podcast challenge, because if you can't tell, I love my podcast. And so I was starting to do the thing, start a podcast challenge. And the people in my community that had done the other challenges, they weren't ready yet to do that challenge. And so as Adam mentioned, I ended up going to Europe. I did these street interviews. It was amazing. And I took space from starting the Start a Podcast Challenge. And then all of a sudden, I said, they're not ready for the Start a Podcast Challenge. They need to find their voice first. So then what I did, I made the goal smaller, right? So the goal in the beginning was start a podcast. I changed the goal, made it smaller, and I changed it to find your voice. And then all they did was they recorded a voice note every day on their phone with dares. What have you done recently that you're proud of? Which is funny because that was a question I was asking people when I was in Europe doing the street interviews. None of it was intentional. It was all just something that I was moving through. And so anyway, that was something they would ask themselves, what is something you've done recently that you're proud of? And then I showed them these comfort circles where they could ask themselves the question, or they could ask a friend the question, or they can ask someone that they're in a shared experience. Let's say you're at a restaurant or at a baseball game and you can ask someone there, or you can ask a total stranger the question and record it in your phone. And so we started with that. And the majority of the people just did it for themselves. There were some people that did it at their yoga studio and asked friends and their kids and things like that. But it's still, by them being able to record it in their phone, in 17 days, just one dare a day, the most growth happened that I've ever seen from anyone. And so that's what I mean by a goal, is identify if you're not moving and you're not going into action and your self-talk is crippling you, then think about how you can make that goal smaller, but it's still aligned with what you want to do. And so that's a really important thing. And then the other thing to notice, a lot of people talk, and I don't know if you guys will know this already, but it's called, in my world, it's called SMART goals, where you have to be specific and measurable and all this stuff. That's great. If you know exactly what you want to do that. But if you don't, it's okay to have a rough draft goal. You can have an idea of what you want to do and then do one step that feels good to you and to go in that direction. And then when that's done, you just take another step. They can be the littlest step. I don't know if you guys watched the movie Happy Feet, but there was a little guy that jumped on the ice and he's the one that helped save the whole thing. Sometimes it's the smallest move that can really make the biggest impact. And that's why I find your voice worked out so well, because it was the smallest thing and no one had an excuse of not being able to do it because you could do it in a minute a day. And so that's how I feel about goals. And then the A, I'm so excited to tell you this, Adam, because I just figured this out yesterday. The A is accountability. And here's the thing, the podcast is the ultimate accountability because you have a tool. You said all these things I've done stand-up comedy, I did speaking, I applied for a TED Talk, I did this program, 75 Hard, this challenge that I wanted to do. Anyway, lots of other stuff. And it's all because I'm speaking it out loud on this podcast. So there's something about announcing it that makes it ingrained in my head. And so the A in I'm Game is accountability. And this podcast is your accountability because you're getting to speak to the things that you want to do. And then you're meeting with people and you're talking to them about these things because it's coming up naturally. And then that in itself is holding you accountable. And you can use accountability in other ways. You could check things off when you do them. That's an accountability way that you could have with yourself. You can have a buddy. You can have an accountability partner, someone that also has the same goals, and you guys can have little meetings. You guys can have meetings to talk to each other about what your goals are and then following through on your goals. So that's accountability. And then the M in I'm Game is my people. And I don't know if you guys have heard of like-minded people. Those are the 5 people that you want to be around that are supportive and encouraging and that lift you up. I love those people. Those people are great, but my people is different. My people is the people that want the same thing as you, and they are going to give you the community, connectedness, and the accountability you need to do the things that you want. And so, for example, your people are these people that are with you starting a podcast in this situation. Let's say you wanted to run a marathon. Then if you're around supportive and encouraging people, but they're not runners, it's going to be really hard to run a marathon. But if you're around runners, that's going to help you do it. And it's the same thing with this podcast. The more you're around people that are wanting the same thing as you, then you're going to evolve together and grow together. And it's such a beautiful thing to witness. And then the last letter is E, which is education. And that's what we're doing now. Adam asked me to come on. We're talking about it. I'm learning new things as I'm talking. He's learning new things. He's got this whole program he's coming up with for you guys. That's education. You could find things on YouTube. You can listen to other podcasts. It's a wealth of things. You can have a mentor, a coach. You have access to a lot of things through Adam's network. But the coolest thing and my favorite part of education is once you learn this thing, even if you are only 2 weeks in, you can educate others. So when you get to meet someone that doesn't have a podcast and you get to help talk to them about the podcast and maybe they start one because of you, or let's say we're not even talking about the podcast and we're talking about something else that you're good at or not even good at, something else that you're doing and you want to teach someone something, the educating others, that's where you get the most fulfillment. And I have a really great story of this is I was asked by Adam, I was only 3 weeks into my podcast. I didn't even have it published yet. I had 10 episodes, and he asked me to be a expert on a cohort panel that someone he knew was doing. And I got to do that. It was in front of 70 people, and I still felt really new. But because I was 3 weeks ahead of these people that had never started a podcast, they really valued my feedback. And there was something about that moment that really lit this whole thing on fire for me, because I felt that fulfillment and that contribution of being able to help other people. And so the educate others piece is really, really important, is really being able to see what you know. And when you are ready, teach someone else, because that's how you're, number one, going to learn it even more. It's going to cement even more in your head that you've learned it. And then you'll get to see the impact it has on another person. So yeah, so that's on game.
Stacey, yeah, this is a brilliant formula that you've come up with here and methodology. And hearing you just describe it right now is incredible. From the first time I heard you, I remember you pitching me through it and taking me through it. So what you just said right here, I think probably because you've been committed and working through it and really focusing on it, you've continued to refine it. And not that you didn't have it earlier, but the way in which you communicate it has become clearer and clearer and clearer. And so it's really neat and impressive to see how streamlined and just kind of crystallized you've made this idea, and how powerful each component is, because I see, as you have taken me through each step, how each of these components is so important and is so essential to being able to achieve and put yourself out. And one of the things that I've seen over life is the people who are willing to put themselves out there, the people who are willing to take these challenges and risks and push themselves a little out of their comfort zone, are the ones that really get to find success and get out into the world and actually have more opportunities. And so that's why I'm really hoping that we can tap into something here with the Boys and Girls Club and showing them at an early age. Because if I had what you have identified here at a young, early age and started to apply these principles to my life, you can go twice as far when you realize that by putting yourself out there, you are in a community and you are starting to experience these new things. And when you have that community, you can go farther. You can tap into new ideas and you can meet new, fascinating, interesting people. One question I have for you, as you took me through this, what would you say to somebody that says, well, Stacey, she's just an exception where she can put herself out there. She's a natural. She can just get out and do these things. I could never get up on stage and do stand-up, or I feel uncomfortable approaching somebody in public and trying to interview them, or I wouldn't want to give a speech in front of a lot of people. Those things feel scary. And I think Stacey has something that I don't. So she's a natural. What's your thinking around something?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because it's interesting. That's something I've been really tapping into with Do the Thing is it helps you get the things that you want, but it also helps you get the things that you didn't even know you wanted. And so that's the biggest thing that I've noticed. There's times we've talked about this before where originally we were talking about a live podcast and I was like, there is no chance I'm going to ever want to do a live podcast. But then I was moving and I kept seeing the impact I was having and I got swept away with it. Now that I love doing them, I get so much energy from doing live podcasts. And so what I would tell people is I'm going to just kind of show, and I don't know if you guys are listening or watching, but I'll do both. I'll try to make it auditory too. But pretty much there's this line, right, where you're looking and you're seeing someone here, whoever this person is, and then you're here. A lot of people think and for people listening, I'm basically putting a big barrier in between my hands. For a lot of people, they think they have to go all the way to the end to start. They don't realize they don't have to do that. They just have to go right above the first rung. It's almost like a ladder. And then you go to another ladder, another rung. And then as you do each step, you're getting more and more confident. And then more and more things are opening up for you. The doors have now literally been burst open, but it's your mind is expanding. You're understanding yourself more and what you want. You get to see what brings you joy and fulfillment and excitement. And that's what's so exciting is the more you move, the more you'll see yourself grow. So that's what I would suggest if you're kind of in that moment of wondering, am I going to be good or are people going to like me? Don't even worry about any of that stuff. Just plan on sucking. Just try to suck and then just keep doing it. And then each time learn one little thing that's going to make it better, and then do it again, and then do it again, and then get more and more confident. And guess what? If you look back at the sixth time you've done something to the first, you're going to see a difference.
Yeah, I love this concept of being okay with being a beginner and sucking and making mistakes, right? So is that part of mindset in the I'm game? Where would that fit in of kind of frameworking your where I am and not worrying about, oh, I got to be the best. And if I get up on stage to do stand up, I need to be the best in the world? Or what is that element of I'm a beginner and this is okay?
It's a few things. So we'll talk about stand-up since we're going there. And that, just so you guys know, I decided to do stand-up because a year ago when I was writing the book, I said, okay, I have to do the thing that really terrifies me in order to really feel like I am the spokesperson for Do the Thing. And then I put it on a table for a while and I was like, no, I'm not interested. I pretended like I never thought it until a friend had told me about a workshop that was coming in. And so that's when I actually signed up. Now I love it. It is so much fun. And it's not scary at all for me now. Even though the last one, people didn't laugh as much, I didn't care. I loved it. And I got more into the message of what Do the Thing was. So it helped me in so many ways. And I love being around my people, the people that want the same thing as me. So with that, what you're saying with sucking and being able to, that actually goes into a few things. It goes into stories that we have about ourselves, and really kind of understanding what those stories are when they come up, because you can be anything you want. And I don't mean that in I'm a motivational person. I am saying that seriously. You can just hear that story. You could thank it for coming to visit you. And then you can say, I don't need that right now. I'm befriending you and I appreciate you coming by to visit. And this is the person in your head you're talking to. And then you can let him or her go. So that's where it would go under, but it also goes under accountability. This is where I was going with comedy. I knew I was going somewhere with that. In my comedy class, there were several people that did not perform because they didn't think they were going to be good enough. My performance, it did not dial in until the last week, but I never once said I'm not going to perform. I said, I'm going to perform no matter what, even if I suck. I said, maybe I won't invite people, but I'm still going to be okay doing it. And then it crystallized in the last week. And then even though people didn't laugh as much, I still thought it was good enough for what I did. And so I still thought I got a lot out of it. But there's one of the Do the Thing experts who had to speak at his sister's wedding. So he joined Toastmasters. And then all of these things have opened up for him because his sister asked to speak at her wedding. And then he started doing things to be able to speak at the wedding. And now, I mean, he's in his own world. Now he's the human potential coach and he's doing all these crazy, amazing things. And it started with his sister wanting him to speak at the wedding. And so that was the thing that helped him move. Or there might be someone that wants to sign up for, we'll say the marathon example, because I think that one everyone has in their head. When you're signing up for a marathon, you're not going to not run the marathon. Those things are expensive. They're like $150. You're going to maybe walk the marathon. You just might not run it. So that's where it comes from. It's like mindset, accountability. There's a few things mixed in there in terms of the formula.
One of the things you just mentioned about doing the stand-up experience is you pushed yourself and you told yourself, no matter what, I'm going to do it. But maybe I won't invite my friends, right? It's more about for you as opposed to I'm going to market myself doing something, right? So in that, it sounds like you pushed yourself and challenged yourself, but you still created a safe space for yourself. So in creating that safe space, I'm wondering if there's a balance between challenging yourself and pushing yourself, but also maintaining a safe space to feel comfortable in what you're doing.
I love that, Adam, because it's a lot about our boundaries. That's the word that's coming to my mind right now, is understanding what our boundary is and not feeling like you have to go too far outside of it. But if you could just go a little bit and you know that you're inching, then inching is better than nothing. And so how can I move to take one step, whether it's a micro step, a big step, whatever that step is, but at least you're moving. And by moving, it could be something simple. I mean, I do this whenever I'm stuck with something. I might just make an appointment to talk to someone like you, right? Where I'm like, okay, maybe I could just talk to Adam about this problem I'm having. And that's still me moving, is me talking to someone about something. And then after I talk to you, new ideas are going to open up. And then that's when I'm going to make my next step. So it could be the really simple move that you're doing. And then I forgot, this actually made me remember another piece of the formula, which is it's part of education, but it's being okay asking for help, really putting aside your ego and knowing that it's okay. And people like to help. And that's how people get contribution. And so being comfortable, really being able to ask anyone that you want for help. You could email me, ask me for help. You could email Adam. It's amazing. People love to help people. And I'm just saying us, but I mean, you could do it with 100 other people that you're hearing on podcasts, and you'd be surprised with how many people will respond.
As we come to a close right now, I would love for you to kind of give us a little bit of final thoughts on what is in it for people, why you think they should take this challenge upon themselves and push themselves, and kind of, I think we need to find a way to add in to our curriculum the I'm game beyond this talk, kind of like a structured I'm game thing that they could put themselves through before they even jump into starting recording. I love that you said, let's break things down into smaller goals, kind of smaller bits that we can accomplish. And then as we accomplish those, we get closer and closer to larger and larger goals. So these kind of smaller pieces. And so what we would have is the I'm game kind of first class that they could take, kind of put themselves through it as they then approach into going into the podcast that sets them up. So I guess as we close, kind of, can you give me, your some final thoughts on what you've seen or what you hope for people or what you think we can achieve here with having people participate in I'm Game and then also podcast?
Yeah, there's so much to it that it's going to be exciting to listen back to this after it's going, because we can't even imagine what it could mean for people, right? Yet there's so many things that could come from you being able to put yourself through a process like this. And we'll talk about first starting a podcast and being able to activate your voice, speak up for the things that are important to you, speak up for the things that are true to you, finding what you're passionate about, what makes you feel alive, and then learning how to connect to another in a way that is meaningful and impactful. And then also having this vehicle to be able to connect to anyone you want. And so really understanding that idea of this podcast is this amazing vehicle. I'll give you an example. I went to Staples a few months ago. It was like 8:00 at night. I was printing something and I met this girl there. Her face was all lit up because she had just written a book and she printed it out because she wanted to do editing. And she was telling the guy, and I overheard their conversation. And I went up to her and I was like, hey, I have a podcast. It's called Do the Thing. I'd love to interview you about your book. And I just interviewed her. I would have never had this conversation with her if I didn't have a podcast. And I have a video of her the day after she has her book, holding this book, this gorgeous book in her hands, and the pride that she has, because I was her first time talking to someone about it. And we've memorialized that experience for her. And now she has this legacy of something the day after she's published something and gotten this book, she's able to now have that in her life. And so that's what a podcast does. It not only gives meaning to you, it gives meaning to others. You're getting encouraged to stretch your comfort zone, and then you're building more and more confidence with yourself. And then as far as in your life, with having a podcast, you're building life assets. So these are things that you're going to get really comfortable talking to people. You're going to get really comfortable if you're applying for a job or an internship, or like I said, asking for investors for some startup that you're excited about. You're going to be like, oh, I already did this a million times with my podcast. So all these skills that you're learning from podcasting, it's going to be brought into your life. And then as far as I'm Game, once you guys learn that and you get to see how it works in the podcast, try it on out something else that you want in your life that's not podcast related and see how it works, because it's really cool how when you put the pieces of the formula into any area of your life, you're able to really get whatever you want. And then you actually were able to get things that you didn't even know you wanted because you're keeping an open mind to whatever comes to you.
This is brilliant, Stacey. I mean, you've said so many things that are just absolutely exhilarating and exciting and just charge me up. So I think this is really cool. I'm excited to continue to do this. And I think maybe we'll have a few of these sessions, I think, as we put these out, because I think that it's really valuable. I'm also really excited that you've really kind of crystallized the I'm Game methodology here and are going to make it really accessible So I'd love to continue to map that out and find out how we insert that into our curriculum. So as the Boys and Girls Club or any other of the school systems come on board, because we actually talked to a few schools who are about to participate as well, this is just so valuable. And every component of the I'm Gaining helps people get out of their comfort zone, get them in the right mindset, overcome the obstacles that can get in their way. And then when you finally reach the end stages of the E, where it's education and helping other people, but also then receiving help, and it just becomes this full circle. So it's just really great what we have here. So I'm excited, Stacey. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I wanted to just mention too, because the thing that's coming up for me right now as you're talking is it's so easy to get stuck in our patterns of things that we're doing in life, like waking up and, okay, I'm going to go to school. Okay, now I'm going to go to the Boys and Girls Club or wherever after school. Now I'm going to go after school somewhere. Now I'm going to go to my job, whatever you have going on, right? It's this constant rhythm of sameness. And you probably have hobbies and you probably have sports you're doing or whatever you're doing on the side. But the podcast is the vehicle to really get to know yourself better and to it gives you almost a deeper purpose to be able to understand who you are and what you're excited about. And so I just wanted to end with that because I do think there's something really powerful about you guys being able to do this now at this time in your life and the things that could open up for you.
Brilliant, Stacey. So I will put links or find a way in which, unless you want to give a shout out to the Do the Thing website right now and any other activities or ways in which if people wanted to join the Do the Thing community that you've been building, what's that process?
Yeah, just go to my website. It's dothethingpodcast.com. And then feel free to email me at Stacey@dothethingformula.com.